Ann Cooper Hewitt was a daughter of Peter Cooper Hewitt, a famed American engineer who in 1901 invented the mercury vapor lamp, which is still used today. After his death, Ann would go on to inherit a huge fortune, but her mother soon engaged in shocking behaviour to try and steal this money. Join me as we explore her story. Ann Cooper Hewitt was born in the city of Paris on the 28th of July 1914, a date which is often considered to be the start of the First World War. It was on this day that the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia, triggering a series of declarations of war across Europe. It was an ominous beginning, which Anne's mother would remind her daughter of frequently later in her life. Her mother was Marion Jean Andrews, a woman who had previously been married to Dr. Père Sather Bruguière and Alexandra Turner Stewart Denning. Both of these men were quite wealthy, and were closely related to prominent New York bankers and financiers. However, Anne's father was neither of these men, but was one Peter Cooper Hewitt. He too was from a very prominent family, as his grandfather, Peter Hewitt, was a millionaire inventor and businessman who was a patriarch of New York City. At the time of Anne's birth, Peter was married to Lucy Bond Work, the daughter of yet another prominent and wealthy banking family. Thus, she was conceived as part of an extramarital affair which Peter was having with Marion from the early 1910s onwards. He would, though, soon divorce his wife and marry Marion. He then formally adopted Anne, perhaps to disguise the fact that she had been born as a result of an affair. With her parents' marriage in 1918, Anne became the sole child of a very wealthy family. This was primarily based on Peter's business interests. An engineer by training, in 1901 when he was 40 years old, Peter had invented the mercury vapor lamp. This was a type of gas discharging lamp that uses an electric arc transmitted through vaporized mercury to produce a very bright light. The new lamp offered enormous benefits on previously available bulbs, notably the fact that the bulbs used in it could last for up to 24,000 hours, transmitting a very bright light. This made them ideal for the use in street lamps and other environments in which very bright lights were needed, such as hospital operating theatres, stadiums, and other public buildings. Consequently, the mercury vapor lamp was quickly adopted widely across the Western world, and indeed these types of lamps are still widely used in many countries over 120 years later. And because he had invented it, and had a patent on the design, Peter Cooper Hewitt became a very wealthy man. This was the context in which Anne grew up, and it would also have a crucial bearing on the entire trajectory of her life. Inventions like these and the history behind them are truly fascinating, and if you want to learn more about these subjects, or any other subject, you should check out today's sponsor, CuriosityStream. If you haven't heard of CuriosityStream, let me tell you. CuriosityStream is a platform where you can watch award-winning and original documentary films, shows and series that you can't find anywhere else. They have content for everyone, with shows on science, nature, technology, and of course my favourite, history. I enjoy watching after researching stories, and I am currently loving the History of Home Presents History's Greatest Homes. You can gain access to thousands of hours of high-quality documentaries and series with plans starting at under $5 a month. Best of all, new content drops every week, so you'll always have something to watch, and you can do this however you want, whether this is on your TV, computer or mobile device, making it easy to watch your favourite documentaries anytime, anywhere. Go to curiositystream.com/forgotten or scan the QR code for unlimited access to the world's top documentary and non-fiction series, and for my subscribers, use promo code FORGOTTEN and you will save 25% off. Anne did not know her father to any real extent. He died in the early autumn of 1921, shortly after her 7th birthday. Peter was born back in 1861, and there was a 20-year age difference between himself and Anne's mother. So, it was unsurprising for him to have died long before Marion. His will was somewhat unusual. He did not leave his entire estate to his wife, nor did he divide it equally between her and their only child. Instead, Peter willed it that Marion would receive just 1/3 of his estate, with Anne receiving the other 2/3. She would assume this wealth in the summer of 1935, when she turned 21 years of age. The sum of money was very considerable. Although his original design for the mercury vapor lamp had some design issues, by 1903 he had worked out the kinks, and the lamp was then adopted across the United States and in many European countries. This includes an innovation known as a mercury arc rectifier, which could convert alternating current power into direct current, the two types of current which had sparked the current war of the 1880s between Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse. Another boom to his finances was in the emergence of the Hollywood film industry and the adoption of Hewitt's lamps for lighting studios. As a result of these endeavours, when he died in 1921, he left behind an estate worth $4 million, a sum equivalent to upwards of $100 million in today's money, depending on how the inflation is calculated. Approximately $2.7 million of this money was put aside in trust for Anne, and she would inherit it in 1935. Sadly, the money would be central to her tragic story in the 1930s. Anne's relationship with her mother was always strained, and this continued as she grew up. Marion was cruel to her daughter, verbally insulting her by calling her an ugly duckling and an imbecile, and she would even physically hurt Anne. Many years later, Anne stated that her mother rarely came near her, instead employing a team of maids to do everything from dressing her in the morning and making her meals, to putting her to bed at night. Instead, Marion lived an aloof life, and she married twice more within a few years of Peter's death. First to Baron Frederick Emile Regis d'Erlanger in 1922, and then to George William Charles MacArthur in 1926. Marion also developed a series of nefarious habits that led to her gradually squandering the immense fortune which her husband had left her. These were a growing alcoholism and an inclination for gambling, a toxic mix for a woman with a lot of money to lose. By the 1930s, these vices were primarily being indulged out in California, where she and Anne were living in San Francisco. Meanwhile, Anne lived a secluded life, with her mother locking her away in her bedroom and deliberately trying to limit her from making friends or socializing. As Anne grew up and neared her 21st birthday, and the age when she would inherit the money her father had willed to her, her mother evidently began to scheme as to how she might acquire the wealth. And there seemed to be one way to acquire this inheritance. A stipulation of her late husband's will had been that if Marion were for some reason to outlive her daughter, and if Anne died childless, then Anne's portion of the estate would revert to Marion. This was a common sense approach, but Marion tried to exploit this in a particularly sinister fashion as her daughter neared her 21st birthday. In August 1934, when she was 20 years old, Anne was having lunch with her mother on the outskirts of San Diego when she developed an uncomfortable ache in her abdomen. Anne was immediately rushed off to a hospital, and at the door she came into contact with a Dr. Tilton Tillman. As soon as the doctor saw Anne, he informed her that she was suffering from appendicitis and would have to undergo surgery to have the appendix removed. Appendicitis was hardly an unusual diagnosis, but some time later Anne revealed that at no stage did Dr. Tillman physically examine her to confirm that this was actually what she was suffering from. Anne underwent surgery 4 days later and spent several weeks recuperating in hospital. During this time, she became increasingly suspicious about what was occurring. She overheard several conversations where doctors and nurses spoke secretly about her care, referring to her as an idiot patient. What Anne would soon come to discover was that as well as having her appendix removed during the surgery, doctors had also carried out a salpingectomy, a treatment which involved the removal of her fallopian tubes. This surgery is normally carried out to prevent cancer or to treat an ectopic pregnancy. But in this particular instance, Ann's mother had schemed to have her doctors carry out the procedure as a form of sterilization so that she could not have children. She had managed to convince them to do this by bribing them and telling other staff of the hospital that Ann was a simpleton. During this time, eugenics was still an acceptable part of Western scientific and medical thought, so the doctors carried out the procedure in order to prevent Ann from having children who might also be mentally incapacitated. Ann would now never have children, and so one of the core provisions of her father's will was in place for Marion to acquire Ann's money. Ann did not roll over and accept this appalling travesty of medical injustice and physical butchery. Instead, she hired legal counsel, and in January 1936, at a very public press conference in an office in San Francisco, she declared to gathered reporters that she was suing her mother for $500,000, claiming that Marion had hired 2 doctors to sterilize her, and that she had also paid them off using money taken from Ann's trust. The press ate up the story, which pitted a malevolent mother against a rich young heiress. Through 1936, there were dozens of stories printed in some of the country's leading newspapers. Eventually, things turned nasty. The police got involved, and both Marion and the 2 doctors she had bribed were arrested and charged with mayhem, a loosely defined crime which could involve maiming or disfiguring a person. If found guilty, Ann's mother was looking at serving up to 14 years in prison. But it never got that far. Ultimately, when the police caught up with Marion, they found her in a hospital in New Jersey after attempting to commit suicide. When it came down to it, Ann wasn't prepared to testify against her in court if it meant sending her to prison, and so the case was quietly dropped. Marion's scheme would never come to fruition. While Ann could never have children, she still had to die before marrying in order for her mother to acquire the $2.7 million part of the estate. And this never occurred. In fact, Marion was dead within a few years. She died on the 30th of April 1939, aged 57, while living in a 1-bedroom hovel of an apartment in New York City, broke and alone. Ann went on to have a colourful life thereafter. Although tragically she could never have children, she married a total of 6 times. Unlike her mother, she didn't seek out wealthy husbands. She had no need to. Instead, she married a line of men from modest backgrounds, including a miner, a barman, and a cowboy, who doubled as a disc jockey. The disc jockey and sometime cowboy was none other than Frank Rodeo Roy Nicholson, and he was both husband number 4 and husband number 6, Anne having divorced him once and then reconciled and remarried him again sometime later. Her marriage to Nicholson created news headlines again for Anne in the late 1940s, when she married him for the first time. Nicholson divorced his existing wife in order to marry Anne, but his wife was then found dead just hours after the divorce was finalized. Her death was later determined to be a suicide, and Nicholson was exonerated from any involvement, but the newspapers wrote up the story to make it seem as salacious as possible, while just weeks later, Anne and Frank were involved in further legal difficulties when they were found to have perjured themselves in evidence presented as part of California's premarital blood test law in order to speed up their marriage. The final act in Anne's dramatic life story came in the 1950s, in the context of the Communist Red Scare in America. This was because she decided to run for the US Senate in the state of Nevada in order to fight communism. Frank became her campaign manager as she ran on the Republican ticket, but in a bizarre turn of events, he also publicly stated that he intended to vote for her Democratic opponent. The campaign never went anywhere, beyond generating some sensationalist headlines. Anne died not long after from cancer in February 1956, while in Mexico, aged just 41, though some sources say she was 40. Her wealth, which her mother had schemed so viciously to acquire, was left to Frank Rodale Roy Nicholson. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Ann Cooper Hewitt. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of the video down below in the comments, and if you have any other suggestions, also be sure to leave them down below in the comments. If you're new, I hope you are subscribed, and be sure to have the notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.